This is Rudkowski of WeAreChange.org here in Miami, Florida. And forever we've been hearing about out-of-control judges who interpret the law the way they want to personally, eviscerating the Constitution and destroying the legal judicial system. And people think there's no way of getting any justification, any form of justice when it comes to a judge who's out of control. Well, these guys, Grant and Carlos of Photography is Not a Crime, are proof that that is not true. Now, first of all, these guys have an amazing, incredible story of putting a judge in his rightful place. How did this story begin? Because I know this story is complicated, there's multifaceted to it. How did it start?
Yes, well, I mean, it is very complicated. If you go on photographyisnotacrime.com, you can get all the background. But basically, Michael Hoffman, who is one of our correspondents up in Jacksonville, he went to the Jacksonville International Airport with some signs criticizing the TSA and criticizing the IRS. The whole point of that was we do audits. We test their knowledge of the First Amendment, and we write about it, whether they respect our First Amendment rights or whether they don't. And this is what we do. We've been doing it for a while. And he ended up getting arrested for trespassing. And so we said, okay, that's fine. And we wanted to, as PINAC, we wanted to record the trial. And we want to bring a camera into the courtroom, which is legal in Florida. The Florida Supreme Court ruled in 1979 that you can, if you're media, which we are, you can bring cameras into the courtroom. We've done it twice down in Miami. Even on my trial, it's not that big of a deal. Up there, they said, no, you can't. And it went through this whole process where you have to fill out this form, that form, do this. You have to jump to this hoop. You have to do all these things where finally we said, screw it. We filed a lawsuit. And the lawsuit got kicked back to different levels of courts because this was a guy named Chief Judge Mark Mahone of the Fourth Circuit in Florida. So he's the top dog up there, the top judge. He administers 3 counties. And he was calling the shots. He was saying, no, I don't care about the Supreme Court. You guys have to prove you're media. You're not media. You're not traditional media. And
even though you guys have better numbers than even all the local media combined when it comes to just your website and the number of hits you guys are getting.
They initially asked to prove that we're media. They said, well, you have to prove that you get 1,000 hits a month, which obviously they were not very understanding of how the internet works. And we told them, well, we get that in an hour easily, if not less. And then they had to turn around and say, well, then you need to certify this and certify that. And
wait a second. That's when they decided to move the goalposts, okay? So they asked us to jump through hoop A. We said, oh, we jumped through hoop A in every state in the country. They said, oh, okay. And they wrote up a whole new order. Here's the new goalposts. And they made it so that basically anybody besides the Florida Times Union or a local TV station would have to pay about, we would take them about 90 days and about $10,000 to $15,000 to pay a court monitor just to report on Duval County Courthouse.
The bottom line, Luke, is this. They told us, if you want your correspondent, which is actually a 70-year-old man named Thomas Covenant, we call him Epic Old Guy.
EOG.
He's a veteran, EOG, he's very harmless. And they said, well, if he wants to record the judicial proceedings, then he has to prove to us that he has covered the judicial proceedings 6 months prior to him asking to cover the judicial proceedings. So basically, they made it impossible.
I mean, how are you supposed to cover judicial proceedings when you need approval to cover judicial approving? And that makes no sense.
Here's the thing. Initially, they said that initially, and we said, yeah, we've done it. Like I said, we've done it over the years. So yeah, we've done it as an organization. Yeah. But then no, we want the videographer, the guy who's we want him to prove that he's covered judicial proceedings, and he hasn't.
This is Jim Crow in action. And these days, they don't care if you're white, black, red, purple, or green. It's Jim Crow. It's the system versus the normal person. Yeah. And that's a grandfather law. They're saying, well, if you haven't done it yet, you're never going to be allowed to do this.
Yeah. So just to break this down, you had one guy who was arrested at the airport with a sign. You guys also did a sting operation with another guy who had the opposite sign saying he loved the TSA, and he wasn't arrested. No, so with this happened, there's a court proceedings. You guys are trying to film it just to keep everything on the public records, just to make sure that the politicians and the legal judicial systems are held accountable for what they do, and now they're making you jump through all these hoops. What happens next?
Yeah, okay, so while we're battling this, we're filing lawsuits about trying to record in court and all that. So Jeff Gray, honor your oath, he goes out there and in the same spot where Michael Hoffman was. Michael Hoffman said, screw the TSA or the IRS, whatever he said. Jeff Gray said freedom of speech. And the cops came up to him, and he asked them, am I trespassing? And they said, no, you're fine. And they walked away. So that tells you that it wasn't the trespassing they were worried about. It was
the content of the message.
Right.
It was all about the
you
content
can't,
of the
I mean,
message.
if you say freedom of speech, oh, we love you. If you say screw the TSA, well, you know what, we have to go to jail. And then what happened was the Judge Brett Shore, a Duval County judge who is under Mark Mahan, who is the administrator, he ruled that you cannot, that Mike Hoffman cannot use the First Amendment as a defense, even though it was a clear, look, it goes down to this. Look, the cop says, you're trespassing. Hoffman says, no, it's the First Amendment, let's settle it in court.
And he was on public property at the time.
Right. And this is what courts are supposed to be for. Well, we'll settle it in court. And then the court says, well, great, but you can't use the First Amendment defense here. We're going to talk about trespassing. Well, that is not a fair trial. Yeah. That is not a fair trial at all.
Trespassing in a public place at an airport, by the way.
Right.
And he was going to make a public records request. There's no other way to make a public records request without entering public property. And he wasn't disturbing the peace. He wasn't disorderly.
Besides that, they arrested him because they did not know that at the time. They know he was holding up signs, and he didn't tell them that he was doing a public records request, which you don't have to. But that's kind of besides the point. He was holding up signs. It is a First Amendment issue. And then they said, look, no, it's not a First Amendment issue. It's a trespassing issue. We knew we had lost already. We were already prepared for the conviction. But then we're still fighting. We want to record this trial because we knew what they were doing. We knew they're going to screw him over, and we wanted to get it on the record for the appeal, because you can't really depend on the court writer. You can't really depend on that person because we didn't write everything or we got lost. It happens. It really does.
Plus, they charge you exorbitant fees just to even get those transcripts.
Mike's had to pay that for his appeal for the transcript, but we want to at least have the real record, the video, the audio record. And my God, it was so complicated, and it's so many different angles you can go into. But that's it. And
so then, on July 1st, when everybody was preparing for the 4th of July holiday, Judge Mark Mahone, who is the chief judge in the Fourth Circuit, issued an edict suspending the Constitution.
Wait, I know. Before that, I do. So what happened? I knew I was going to say something. All right. What happened? So when they told Mike Hoffman that you're not allowed to use the First Amendment as his defense, he goes in front of the courthouse with a sign that criticizing Judge Mark Mahon and Brent Shore. Mahon is the administrator. Shore is the guy who's going to
his trial judge.
Right, and criticizing them for violating his right to free speech. And then what happened was Mark Mahon.
On July 1st, Mark Mahon issued an illegal order. He legislated from the judicial bench and said that criticism of the bench or accusing the judges of being corrupt in the public sidewalks surrounding the prodigious $360 million taxpayer-financed facility, or taking photographs, both taking the photos and criticizing the judges,
he said
was a security threat.
He said it is equivalent to yelling fire in a crowded theater. And that's always an argument they use in the First Amendment because, there's the time, place, and manner restrictions because the First Amendment is not absolute. If you yell fire in a crowded theater and you're actually bullshitting, well, that's not cool.
But your First Amendment rights are strongest when you are petitioning the government and when you are recording for publication, when you are going to publicate or print or write about what is going on. Courts have ruled that consistently. In fact, there was an Occupy Wall Street case in New York where a journalist was protected by the First Amendment, but somebody who said that he wasn't there to write about it was not fully protected by the First Amendment. So he's out there exercising his First Amendment rights strongly. He is petitioning his government for redress, and they said that it is tantamount to attempted murder. I mean, that's what yelling fire falsely in a crowded theater would be. So they did that, and the Washington Post's top legal analyst.
Let me just backtrack a little bit.
Backtrack.
So what happened here is there was a case that the local media was not interested in. It was a misdemeanor trespassing trial, and who would really be interested in that unless it's one of your guys? So we were interested in that. And then while we were fighting the battle to record in the courtroom, Mahon comes up and that you can't photograph this courthouse, you can't video record the courthouse, you cannot hold signs, you cannot criticize judges in the courthouse. You cannot criticize him, is basically what he says. He's like, I'm a thin-skinned bitch, is what he said. And you cannot criticize me. And And that's it. So I'm going to make it a criminal contempt, you know. So if you actually do
criminal
that,
contempt.
Yeah.
You
Which
will
means-
go to jail with no trial because the judge has said, I've already tried all of you for criticizing me, and you are all guilty if you do it.
until you apologize.
Guilty upon
until you
sight.
apologize, and that's how you get released from jail. We don't want that. We don't want
Right.
that. We don't want
So-
that. But
so-
Just hold on. This judge is totally out of control, right? He's saying anybody who criticizes him will go to jail, violating the constitutional law, violating this other guy's constitutional law for just expressing a sign in a public place, totally throwing him in jail. What did you guys do next?
Okay, so the Washington Post, their top legal blogger, a fully independent blogger who runs a blog of about 20 constitutional lawyers. He's a professor at
his
UCLA.
name?
His name is Eugene Volokh, and he
Very-
writes
very
The
respected.
Volokh Conspiracy. But that belies the fact that
There's no
he is
lawyer-
a very top lawyer.
there's no lawyer in this country who does not respect him.
No, he is
That's-
extremely respected. So, he has his own completely editorially independent blog with the Washington Post. So, late in the afternoon of the 3rd of July, he came out and published a very dry piece clearly saying, with precedent, that Judge Mark Mahone violated the Constitution, violated the First Amendment with his orders. Well, I happened to be on vacation in Washington, D.C., and I broke from my vacation in D.C. on the 4th of July to write an article because Judge Mark Mahone shit on the United States Constitution
what?
on 4th of July weekend.
He
He
did
shit
what?
on the Constitution on the 4th of July weekend.
What kind of nerve of that man? Damn, man,
His nerve.
that nerve.
So what did you guys do next? What was the next proceedings to get back at this judge?
So look,
What I just said there, that was the catchphrase.
Well-
But I wrote an article about how he breached the oath of office.
no, he shit on the Constitution.
And he shit on the Constitution, and he should be removed from office because these oaths, they're a big deal. They're part of the Constitution, and the oath that he took to defend and support the Constitution, that is the only thing that keeps this little United States of ours together. Otherwise, everybody can freelance.
And here's the thing, you know, we're used to cops violating the First Amendment because, you know, they don't care. But we should expect judges to, especially a chief judge, to respect the Constitution. That is what cops will always tell you, well, we'll settle it in court, and we do, and you have to spend a shitload of money. You have to go
And
through
time.
you have to go through the whole ordeal, and they always win, even though you win. And then when you have the judge saying, screw you, you know, we're not even going to allow you to record. We're not going to allow your guy to use the First Amendment as your defense. And we're not going to allow you to protest or video record outside the courthouse, which costs almost $500 million. But then he also said in that order, but if you credential media, which no one really has defined that, credential media to me, and I'll tell you what credential media means. It means that you have an identification. I work for this company. We have them. The Times Union has them. You know, ABC has them. I work for this company. That's it. That's it. It doesn't give you any more power. Legally, it doesn't give you anything. It just shows you, okay, I'm a reporter. And so he said, well, the other credential media, they're allowed to do whatever the hell they want, but not you guys, not PINAC. No, fuck you, PINAC, even though we've been writing since 2008 daily. I mean, we're a very national site. And anyway.
Well, what happened
There we
next
go.
was-
Wait, so what happened? What made this judge step back and say, like, holy cop, I should have never messed with PINAC?
So what happened was the July 4th article went viral, and it called for a call flood. So I'm sure he got a few thousand calls from angry people all over the internet saying that you're wrong, Judge Mark Mahone. You screwed up. You shit on the Constitution.
Well, there was also Pope Hat, who is they call them blogs, BLAWGS, you know, the lawyers writing blogs, and that's how they're called. So Pope Hat is another very well-respected blog, BLAWG, and they came out against, you know, this whole order. And he was
They
mocked.
pulled out the libertarian wood chipper.
Look, and this judge, Mahan, he is a third-generation Jacksonville native.
Attorney.
Yeah, his grandfather was a prominent attorney. His father was a prominent attorney. So he kind of just got in there through his name.
He was
you
a
know.
legislator. He was actually a Florida legislator for over 7 years. And from what we're told,
didn't do a thing.
he didn't do much, and they pretty much keep him on the bench like the chief lobbyist for the judges. But I digress.
Okay.
I digress.
What'd you guys do to put the guy in his place?
Wait, we're working to that. So this is a man who is used to getting what he wants. And look, Jacksonville is like 5 hours away from Miami. North Florida, we're in South Florida. And he probably figured, who are these people from Miami telling me what to do? Well, number one, we are based in Miami. We have people up in Jacksonville, including EOG and Jeff Gray.
Honor your oath.
Honor your oath. And he figured, I'm not going to let these guys dictate what I want to do because my courthouse in my city or whatever the hell he thinks it is, my country or whatever, he thinks he just overreached. He overreached, and then he basically issued the order, and the order just blew up in his face. The Florida Times-Union came out, and they were the first ones who reported on it. And this is what really I noticed. They asked, is this right or wrong? And the commenters they didn't really care about us recording in the courtroom. They don't really care about that. But they said, wait, are you saying we can't photograph that courthouse? We can't protest against the judge? The judge is saying we can't criticize the judge.
Yeah.
Look.
So anyway, so we got a lawyer. We lawyered up, and Thomas Covenant and Jeff Gray sued in federal court. The case is called Covenant versus Mahone, in his official capacity as Chief Judge of the 4th District in Florida.
Or as we call it, epic old guy against epic asshole judge.
So you guys not only did like just a whole media blitz about the situation, not only had people call into his personal office, but you guys also are filing a lawsuit against the judge.
We fought several. Right. And they were getting kicked out. They were getting rejected.
We had been suing listen, we had been suing the circuit for 6 months. But then when we filed in federal court, things got serious. Between the call flood and the filing, he rescinded the first half of his order in 2 days.
Because look, you have to understand.
So he rescinded and said, okay, this order that I made through myself, half of it, saying that no, you cannot protest me in any way, shape, or form. No way you can't criticize me. No way you could hold me accountable in any way, shape, or form. He stepped back on that.
So he said, he goes, okay, now you can protest because, case law really has that established. But the videography part, no, you can't because case law does not have that fully established. Lawyers are really, dependent on that stuff. And so he did backtrack. That's very, very embarrassing for a judge, a chief judge. But
that was just the start, because then the Michael Hoffman trial happened, and all of the local media outlets went into the trial and published the following. We covered the trial, we recorded it, and we did not get credentials. And what that did was
tweeted it.
They effectively wiped out his order because they ignored it, they published it, and there was no repercussions. So any repercussions against us would be selective enforcement.
And here's and I worked in the mainstream media for a long time before running PINAC, is like, this is not a case they wanted to cover. It really is a misdemeanor. They don't really care about it.
This is the most publicized misdemeanor trial in the history of trespassing.
Right, so they were not interested in this, but then when Mahon started doing all this stuff, and we were still not allowed to record it, but then they came in to record it, and the first thing they said was, they tweeted it out, we're in, PINAC is out, we have no credentials, they have no credentials.
Yep.
What the fuck?
So the judge walked back half of his order, right? Then the trial happened, and then a week afterwards, the judge erased all of the orders. He didn't even tell us about erasing the March order.
We announced the protest.
Right, and we announced the protest too.
Yes.
So we announced the protest for yesterday, and we've got a great video from the protest.
Well, we announced it like a couple weeks before. We kind of talked about it. We created a little Facebook page because people were saying, "Hey, we want to protest." It's okay. We create the page. show up. We'll go up there, and we're gonna, basically what we were gonna do is go up there and shoot our cameras, and we'll take the arrest because we knew it was unconstitutional. I don't give a shit about his order. We will beat that in court, and we'll take the arrest, and that was the plan. And then he basically, right before
he backed out. We were ready to get arrested right there for saying on the courthouse steps virtually, Judge Mark Mahone shit on the Constitution.
Right, but then, so he realized all the nation's eyes are on this, so he backtracked. Basically, he had Jacksonville is actually the largest geographical city in the United States, but is really, you don't really hear much about it. Like you think of Florida, you think of Miami, you think Atlanta, New Orleans. So he figured he was going to get away with this, and that no one's going to report on it. He's been 3 generations of family. But then he is not accustomed to online media, new media. He's not used to PINAC, and we're just going to expose it. Then the whole country's looking at him. All his legal peers are looking at him.
Yeah. And then we showed up for the demonstration because we weren't really protesting at that point. We had won.
We were celebrating.
We were celebrating.
Yes.
We were celebrating. So we showed up, and we're standing in the parking lot of the Times Union, assembling all of our gear. And lo and behold, we hear this noise. and there's a biplane flying around with a sign that says, "Jax suppresses the First Amendment." We had no idea this thing was going to show up, and it's like flying all over downtown.
Right, and JAX, because Jacksonville is a long word. JAX means Jacksonville. You know, it's like we will say MIA here, and that's it. So it's like they're flying around, and I had no idea who this guy was, but that showed, man, this is big that we reach people, because here it's not really about PINAC. Okay, we like PINAC, we don't like PINAC. It's when you tell people you're not allowed to record this courthouse that you paid for, people are going to be pissed off. And that's what happened.
And let me tell you a little bit about that courthouse. That courthouse was budgeted to cost $60 million, and the cost ballooned to $360 million. And it's got an enormous, enormous sidewalk and yard complex out in front, where he banned everybody from speaking or photographing or criticizing him or any judge. And
because anything else was cool.
Yeah, anything else is cool. I mean, you know, but out there, where they just built this huge monstrosity, it is, by God, the ugliest courthouse in all of America.
No, I think I wouldn't criticize. I mean, it's okay.
No, it's
okay.
Carlos and Grant literally just came back from Jacksonville, Florida, from their Tinker Day parade, from flying airplanes over the court system, declaring their victory, making the judge back down and run away. Congratulations on your success. Hold on, these guys. This interview is going to go on forever.
So yeah, it could go on forever. You asked.
He's like determined to break in.
No, look.
He's just doing his round.
So Grant comes up there yesterday, and he goes in front of the courthouse and says, "Judge Mahone shit on the Constitution." The cops are there. They just didn't say anything. "Judge Mahone shit on the Constitution." I was like, "What? He shit on the Constitution?" And then people were walking up to us and like, well,
like, what happened?
He ain't the only one, you know. And they're very right, actually. And we had a defense attorney who actually walked up, and they saw a sign that one of our guys had Mahan and Shore, and he said, you know, these are actually some of the nicer ones. You know, so that tells you what the hell. That tells you a lot what's going on up in Duval County.
It definitely does, and it's amazing to see a local victory done by just pure persistence, pure will, and pure honesty and truth, just coming all the way forward. Carlos and Grant, where can people find out more information about your...
You got me started. I want to say one final thing. This is what it's all about. Look, the First Amendment guarantees freedom of the press for everybody. It doesn't say freedom of the press for CBS or for the Times Union, if you're a local credit. Freedom of the press is guaranteed for everybody. As long as you have access to the press, which we do now because of the internet, then you are the press. I mean, you have to do it, you know, on a regular basis to be considered free press, but that's it. So that's the reminder that you can be the media. You can be the media. Our motto is be the media, and you don't have to you don't have to be part of the corporate media to be the media.
And I'm going to tell you this. Now that we've done this, we're going to get a new shirt. It's going to say, "Judge the Judges."
Awesome. Find out about these two great, amazing individuals and their whole organization at Photography Is Not a Crime.
Welcome to Miami again, Luke. And Luke is always coming to Miami, and he's always welcome in Miami. We're a little bit, you know, isolated down here, but it's always good to have Luke Rudkowski, who's a globetrotter, and you know, so he comes down and he's like, you know what, I don't want to enter the United States yet, so this is like a halfway point, right?
Yeah, it definitely is, and it's a pleasure being around comrades who are actually fighting the good fight, standing up, but also not only just fighting, but also having historic victories that will play out not only just now, but throughout history. These are important precedents that are being set, and these guys are setting them.
You know, and I told you this is very complicated. This is not done yet. We're still fighting. I mean, we're going to appeal Hoffman's case. We are going to appeal the ban on recording inside the courtroom. That's going to be easy.
That got rescinded too.
Right, but we want to set a precedent. We want to have it on paper, because this judge screwed up, and he says, well, you're not media. Who defines media? Look, the government should not define media, because when the government defines media, then we might as well live in Cuba, which we're always thinking is the worst place in the world, because they define media. They license journalists. You know, the government should not determine who is media, because the whole point of media is to put their eyes on the government. Do you see what I'm saying? That's what it's all about.
Very, very well said. Thank you so much, Carlos and Grant. You guys are awesome.
I look up at him. He takes out an 8-inch cooking knife, looks me dead in the eye, and says, "You're going to die, you're going to die." And with that, he takes the knife and plunges it into my face.
WeAreChange came to my rescue. All the patriots out there, their love, their support, their donation, all made it possible. So never think that, you know,